Inquiry. It's messy and loud, but effective inquiry is intentional, with youth in charge of their learning. Let's go through the process so you can see your adult role. Your coaching job is to understand what the youth know, what they want to know, and how to effectively support them getting there. You keep them safe and provide supplies. Start with a spark. Build on the learner's prior knowledge and the big idea. Provide a context that sparks interest in the big idea, that gets youth wondering. For today's demonstration, let's consider the big idea of motion and the concept of friction. Note that the adult is asking open-ended questions to understand what youth know and to spark their interest. It is the youth who provide information, decide what they want to explore, and learn.
So we've been exploring the idea of motion, how something starts to move and how it stops. And sometimes in winter, moving and stopping can be a challenge. So what do you know about movement in winter?
I know it gets slippery and it's harder to control your car when there's ice and snow on the road.
Yeah, and sometimes our car won't start.
And I think there's more car accidents. They slide into the ditch or they smack into each other.
If the sidewalk is icy, you can slide on that too.
It's fun to slide, unless you fall. That hurts.
But we do play hockey on the ice.
So how do you know this?
On the news, on TV, when there's storms, there are always car accidents.
I see ice and snow everywhere, even just walking around the neighborhood. It's on the roads and in the parking lots.
When we play hockey after school, we have to use our blades to stop on the ice.
If I'm sledding down a hill, I go further if the sled stays on top of the snow. If it starts to sink down into the snow, the sled starts to drag, and then it just stops.
Tell me more about that.
As youth talk about what they know about the big idea, concepts and terms will naturally be part of that discussion. Let them introduce the terms, but if they don't, you can. Repeat their points in their words, then name the concept to reinforce it.
Yep, friction. Friction is a force. Friction is a force that influences the motion, so it changes the motion. What might be happening?
It slows or stops the motion, like it sort of reaches out to grab the thing to hold it back.
Yeah, it grips it.
It kind of reduces the slipperiness.
It provides traction so the wheels don't slip.
So how could you explore these ideas?
Give youth time to explore, to wonder. Messing about time supports their creativity and their learning. They will play with ideas, check their understandings, and discover what is interesting. Then they'll arrive at their own testable question.
How do you think you'd explore these ideas?
Well, when the ice is smooth, like after the Zamboni cleans it, the ice is faster. Maybe you could use different tracks, some that might be faster.
Aluminum foil. That would be fast.
Yeah, or we could wax it, like waxing the floor or skis. If it was heavier, it would push down and be harder to move.
Friction could be more important if the thing were heavier. We could use different weights.
We could use a sled or a car, and if the hills were steeper, it would go further.
Or what if the wheels are bigger? We could build a ramp to start the car off.
And we'll do a test with different weights on the car and measure how far it goes.
We could do it a couple of times with each weight, in case one is a fluke.
We've got some boxes of paper clips. We could use those as weights.
We could do different ramp surfaces too.
Yeah, but that's a different experiment.
Youth negotiate their question with their team. It's okay if they have more than one possible explanation. This helps them think through the possibilities. Remember to challenge every answer. They need to be able to support their ideas, right or wrong.
Tell me the questions you want to explore.
We have lots of questions.
But we want to start with the weight. What is the effect of the car's weight on the distance that it travels?
So we're going to build a test vehicle.
And launch it from the top of a ramp. We can hold our vehicle at the top, then let it go. That way it always starts the same, with the same conditions.
We'll load the vehicle with different weights. Here's where we'll use the boxes of paper clips. We'll try with none, then one, then two.
Then we'll test how far it travels with each weight a couple of times.
And we'll mark how far it goes with tape, so we can measure it.
Next, we'll average the distances traveled carrying each weight.
And we'll record the weight and distances here in our science journals,
So we don't forget.
What do you think will happen?
Well, We think the vehicle carrying the least weight,
the one with no paper clips,
will be the car that goes the greatest distance.
Because it will be easier to resist the force of friction since it isn't pushing as hard against the surface.
Sounds great. Let's see what happens.
They've been thinking like scientists, and now it's time for hands-on science.
I think we should make the ramp steeper. That'd make it go further.
I think it would be too steep. The car wouldn't go as fast, or maybe it would crash.
Should we try a 75-degree angle?
I think 45 degrees would be better.
If we put the ramp at a 75-degree angle to the track, would that make our car go further?
I'm not sure. How can we find out?
Remember, the science process has rules. Their goal is to come up with a claim that they can support with evidence that has to be shared with their peers. That's science. And remember, it's not linear.
Our question was, what is the effect of vehicle weight on distance traveled?
We thought the less weight, the further it would travel. That friction would produce a smaller effect on the motion.
We designed a test vehicle to use in all of our test runs and a test ramp so we could launch our vehicle in the same manner, regardless of weight.
We conducted 3 trials with each weight, recorded the results, and averaged those distances so each weight or test condition had its own average.
We found that the vehicle with the lowest weight traveled the greatest distance, confirming our expectations. And when we shared our experiences with the other kids, they generally agreed with our findings, but they had more questions for us.
Sam wondered what would happen with greater differences in the weight. Would a really heavy weight interact with gravity and pull the vehicle down the ramp faster, energizing it to go further?
Our vehicle ran off the track a few times. Maybe a bigger weight would make it more stable and controllable.
Pat wondered if we tried with a steeper ramp, so the vehicle was traveling faster when it hit the level part of the track, if we would get the same result. Like, how does speed make a difference?
And Chris wondered what would happen if we tried different surfaces or different wheels on our vehicles. Maybe the friction between the track surface and the wheels was more important than the vehicle's weight.
One thing we wondered about was the wind resistance. How much of a factor would that be? Since the weights were stacked on top of each other, the vehicle got taller as we added weight.
And it changed the center of gravity, too.
What would happen if we redesigned our vehicle to control for wind resistance? We could place the boxes side by side, horizontally, instead of stacking them.
But the shape of the vehicle would need to change to make it work. So we want to redesign our vehicle to make it more wind resistant, control for it.
Or put some sort of roof over everything.
But let's also keep the weight low, in case the center of gravity is a factor too.
I wonder what would happen if we...
By learning through inquiry, young people, or whoever the learner is, they're not just learning about the task at hand. They're not just learning how to build a robot or how to build a paper airplane or how to build a birdhouse. They're developing those life skills such as critical thinking, developing a hypothesis, planning, organizing, communicating, testing their own ideas to see if what they had originally thought is really going to work. All those, what we would call soft skills, those underlying factors that make a person marketable for jobs and make them marketable for further education, that aren't necessarily taught outright. It's embedded within those experiences, and by facilitating that process with young people through an inquiry and discovery method, young people learn to develop those skills in such a way that's very meaningful for them, and that can be applied to a lot of different circumstances. Being able to make good decisions based upon all the information that you have available to you is critical. Being able to communicate your needs, standing up for yourself.
As you listened, what did you hear? Not the adult giving answers or providing questions to explore. In fact, you didn't hear a lot of adult talk. What you did hear was open-ended questions, being that coach on the side, letting the players play the game, the inquiry-based learning game.